Okay, so this video is over describing data on a histogram. So let's go ahead and look at that first question. It says a histogram shows the number of payphones that were active by year in a large city. How many payphones would you expect to be active between 1976 and 1980? So what we would do is we're going to look at our different answer choices, and we have seen that 1976 and 1980 would be somewhere here on the left side of the graph. So let's look at over 200, and we're just going to go ahead and graph these. So over 200, and we're going to mark this in green with this little mark. Okay, and then we have between 150 and 200, so it'll be halfway in between. Then we have between 50 and 100. And finally, we have fewer than 50. Okay, so when we look at our graph, we're trying to figure out what makes sense, like what's logically that not from 1976 and 1980 that could have been the number of payphones. So as we see, it looks like the number is increasing and then it just plummets. So if we look at it from 1980, or right here, we have 200. That doesn't make sense because it's too large of a difference here. So we are going to go with between 150 to 200 because it's right there. It's a slow decrease. Okay, it's the closest one to the data. Okay, next one, it says, which statements are true given the histograms? Okay, it says the histogram is symmetrical. Well, looking at the graph, it's not symmetrical because if I cut the data in half, it's not the same on both sides, so it can't be that one. Then it says the histogram is evenly distributed. Well, it's not evenly distributed. Not everything has the same amount. Okay. Then it says the cluster from 4 to 10. So I'm looking at 4 to 10 of texts were sent in the afternoon and evening. I'm going to say that that is true. Because if you were to look at it, here's the data of the number of text messages compared to different times in the day. There is more at night and in the afternoon. More texts were sent from 6 to 8. So I'm looking at 6 to 8. So here's 6 to 8. Then from 8 to 10. And I'll do this in another color. So here's 8 to 10. Well, that's false because from 8 to 10, there are more text messages than from 6 to 8. So it couldn't be that one. Then it says the peak from 4 to 6. So I'm looking at 4 to 6. There's a peak, and that's correct. So remember, peaks are the tallest bar. So let's see if we have the correct answers. Yep, good job. All right, here's this next question. It says, given the histogram, use the drop-down menus to identify the elements. So let's look at this word frequency. It's how much of an event occurs. So 0 frequency means it doesn't occur. That's where your gap is. Well, here I looked that there is a gap here between 351 to 400. So that means that there is a 0 frequency there. And let's check it. Yep. Okay, the next one, it's a peak. So when they talk about a peak, they're talking about the highest bar. So right here we have the highest bar, and it ranges from 651 to 700. Okay, another question that you might see is this one. It says the histogram shows the monthly sales for a greeting card company in 1 year. Which best describes the data from May to June and October to December? So let's go ahead and look at these days. So they say May to June. So here's May to June, and I look at the bars of our histogram, okay? Then it says from October to December. So you have October to December. Okay, so now I'm just looking at them. And we're going to look through our answer choices. We have symmetry. Well, that's not it. Because symmetry is if I cut something in half, it's the same on both sides. Gaps, well, those don't represent gaps. Gaps means that there's a zero frequency. There's no bars there. And then no frequency and gaps, those go hand in hand. So our answer here would be clusters. So clusters mean that that's where the data is grouped together. So from May to June, there's a group. And from October to December, there's another group. Okay. Another picture that you might see, or another problem, it says interpreting the shape of the data. So here they gave us the number of runs and we had to put the data here. So this part could have been a little difficult because they didn't really give you instructions on how to figure out your histogram. So on your side where it says data or data, you're going to just type in those numbers. Each row has to have one individual number, and I got the numbers here. So I saw 1 here and I put a 1 on the top and so on. And then I clicked on show histogram and it created this histogram for us. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at our problem. It says enter the data to create a histogram, which I just talked about. Then check all that apply. So we're looking through it. It says the histogram has one cluster. Well, that's false because if I look at it, there's a cluster here and there's another cluster here. So that brings us to 2 clusters. Okay. Then it says the histogram has one peak. Well, if I look at it, there's only one that has the tallest bar. So that's true. So that means there can't be 4 peaks. Then it says the histogram has 0 frequency from 4 to 5. So if I look at 4 to 5, 0 frequency means there's a gap, means there's no bar there. Okay, so there's nothing there. So that's also true. So let's go ahead and look through our answers and see how we did. Yep, looks about right. Okay, another question that you could see, same thing. They want you to put these data points into this program here. Click show histogram and it's going to create your own histogram. So I'm going to read the problem and I want you to pause the video and see what you come up with. So it says then select the correct answers. So go ahead and pause the video and we'll go back and we'll check it. Okay, so what you should have gotten is these. The histogram is not symmetrical. That means if I cut the data in half, it's not the same on both sides. Evenly distributed, that also means symmetrical. Then the left side of the graph is a mirror image of the right side. So these 3 represent what a symmetrical histogram would be. So what you should have got is the histogram is not symmetrical. All right, another question, and we just have one more after this. It says enter the data to create a histogram and use the drop-down menu to complete the statements. So here we have our histogram, and we're just going to go through and read those questions, and we're going to fill in the blank. It says Liv keeps track of how much money she makes every time she babysits. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my histogram just to understand what is this talking about. So the numbers that I put in, these are money. This is the dollar sign, so I'm going to put it in green because money's green. Well, not lime green, but green. Okay, so I'm looking down here. This represents money, so I'm going to put another dollar sign there. Money, moolah. Okay, and then this is just representing how many times it happens. Okay, so before you answer these questions, you got to be able to understand what is this graph talking about. Okay, so let's look at it. It says the peak at blank tells us the money Liv makes blank. Okay, well, the peak is 8 to 9. Okay, and that tells us that Liv makes $8 to $9 frequently, a lot. That's usually what she's making. So we would get most often. So the tallest bar, the peak, the frequency, the most frequent, that means it happens the most. Okay, there's a no bar at blank. So if I look at it, well, here I have a gap, and I'll do this in a different color. I have a gap right here. Okay, so you have nothing there. So we have a gap at 12 to 13. And that means, well, what does 12 to 13 represent? Remember, it represents money. Okay, so that means Liv has never made between $12 to $13. Okay, so it's really important that you're able to look at those histograms and understand what these numbers mean. Because 6 to 7 means money. Okay, how much Liv earns. From here, 1, 2, 3, and 4 represents how much time she earns that money. Okay, all right, and this is the last slide. Okay, so same thing, we entered our data, and we're going to use that data to answer this question. It says Sinclair, I had a student named Sinclair, keeps track of the number of books he reads every month for 10 months. How many months did he read 4 or more books? So before I move on, I got to understand what these numbers mean. So the numbers that I inputted over here where this data is, it represents books. So I'm going to write books down here so I know what that means. 2 to 3 books, 4 to 5 books, 6 to 7 books. Okay, but the question says 4 or more. Well, does 2 to 3 represent 4 or more books? Nope. Does 4 to 5 represent 4 or more? Yes. And this bar goes up to 5. Does 6 to 7 books represent 4 or more books? Yes. And this goes to 1. So now we're thinking, how many months did he read 4 or more books? So we're going to add 5 plus 1, and we get 6. Great job. Okay, well, I hope that this video helps. Remember that this is at your own pace. If you need help, just let me know. Message me on Schoology, and I'll try my best. Okay, well, I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.